Imagine the standard Silicon Valley AI lab right now. Unlimited budgets, these endless racks of NVIDIA H100s.
Right.
And everyone is just, comfortably coding in CUDA. It's a brute force game. It's just who has the most compute.
It's a checkbook competition, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you look at what's happening over at Deepseek with their new v3.2 release, and it feels like you've walked into a completely different universe.
A universe defined by something else entirely.
Right. One that's defined not by excess, but by this pure, relentless engineering desperation.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a technical breakdown of their architecture, and one detail from a user, I think it was MD Yoro, really put this in perspective for me.
What was that?
He pointed out that Deepseek isn't just optimizing their models. They are effectively bypassing standard CUDA kernels to write low-level PTX assembly code.
Wow.
And for anyone who doesn't code, that is like deciding to build a skyscraper with the microscope.
It's an excruciating level of manual work, something you would just never do unless you were completely backed into a corner.
That's it. It suggests they aren't just competing. They are squeezing every single drop of juice out of these bandwidth-constrained H800 chips.
Because they literally cannot buy the H100s that their American rivals are using.
But here's where the story gets really interesting. Just as I was forming this narrative in my head, that they were purely surviving on older NVIDIA tech, the picture shifted.
It got more complicated.
A lot more complicated. We found out this is actually a hybrid beast.
Okay.
They are training on those tortured NVIDIA chips, but at the same time, they're aggressively porting the inference over to Huawei's domestic Ascend hardware.
And doing it fast.
Incredibly fast. They did in 6 months what most labs take years to figure out, all to hit this crazy price point of 1 yuan per million tokens.
Which is almost nothing. It really forces you to wonder, doesn't it? While the Western giants are fighting with checkbooks, is the real danger coming from a team that's forced to win with nothing but raw code efficiency?
That really is the core tension we need to unpack today. Deepseek's strategy, this whole approach born entirely from operating under extreme hardware constraint, it feels like it's doing nothing less than rewriting the economic rulebook for AI.
And that's exactly what this deep dive is about. We're going to explore how this efficiency-driven innovation, especially that rapid, successful move to integrate with domestic hardware, is inspiring this whole technological self-reliance movement around the globe.
Okay, let's start where the innovation really began, which is in the Deepseek mindset itself. The sources we looked at describe them as a smart follower company.
Which can sound a little deceptively modest.
It does. I mean, they aren't trying to invent the next transformer architecture from scratch.
No, their entire focus is on taking existing state-of-the-art methodologies and just optimizing them to an insane degree. Their genius is in integration and refinement.
So they identify where the current models are inefficient and just attack those areas.
They attack them aggressively. They are masters of engineering integration, absorbing the latest research papers almost instantly, and adapting that knowledge to boost efficiency and performance. And this isn't just a design choice.
It's a survival mechanism.
It's a direct operational response to the hardware export restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't scale outward with more chips, you have to scale inward with, just pure code elegance.
And the hardware they use for pre-training, that really paints the picture perfectly. We know they worked on their V3 and R1 models using an estimated cluster of about 2,048 NVIDIA H800s.
Which is a lot of compute.
It is, but that effort consumed about 2.79 million GPU hours. And while that sounds massive, it pales in comparison to what their Western peers are doing.
It truly does. We have to keep this contrast front and center. I mean, look at the figures coming out of Meta for their Llama 3.1405B model.
Right.
They leveraged over 16,000 H100 GPUs.
15,000.
And required a staggering 30.84 million GPU hours for training.
That's 8 times the GPUs and over 10 times the GPU hours. It's a whole different ballgame.
It really underscores the fundamental constraint Deepseek is facing. They just don't have access to that level of raw, cutting-edge compute. And that forced their hand. Algorithmic efficiency had to become the substitute for raw hardware horsepower.
They had to innovate just to stay in the race.
Exactly. To reduce the hardware they needed, to reduce the GPU hours required to train a frontier-level model.
Which brings us back to that fascinating detail you reacted to earlier, the engineering extreme of writing low-level PTX assembly code.
The skyscraper with a microscope.
Exactly. For anyone in the audience who might not be deep into, compiler architecture, you break down why that's so extreme. What do they gain or risk by doing this?
This is where you see the true technical desperation. Look, When you normally write a program using standard CUDA kernels, you're relying on NVIDIA's very mature, highly optimized software stack to translate your commands into instructions the GPU can run.
It's reliable, it's fast.
It's reliable, it's portable across different NVIDIA chips, it just works. PTX, or parallel thread execution, is basically the assembly language for the GPU.
So by writing directly in PTX, they're just skipping the middleman entirely.
Entirely. They are taking complete manual control. They are circumventing those standardized kernels to squeeze every single microsecond of performance out of the H800's memory, its calculation units, and maybe most importantly, its constrained bandwidth.
And as that user, MD Oro observed, this only makes sense if you're stuck.
It only makes technical sense if you are absolutely locked into suboptimal hardware like the H800. If they had H100s, the smart, practical, financially sensible choice would be to just get a bigger cluster of H100s and stick to the standard CUDA stack. It's just so much easier and faster to develop and maintain.
But that raises a pretty critical point about sustainability, though, doesn't it? I mean, this is a technical masterpiece, but is it also kind of a ticking time bomb? Custom assembly code is notoriously difficult to debug and maintain.
And to port to new hardware.
So are they building up this massive technical debt by chasing this optimization?
That is the essential trade-off, 100%. They gain this unparalleled performance efficiency right now on their current limited H800 fleet.
They're maxing it out.
They're extracting every last bit of possible performance. But you are absolutely right, it results in massive technical debt. If NVIDIA releases a new chip, or if Deepseek somehow gets a hold of H100s, that beautiful, bespoke PTX code might need a total rewrite. The underlying GPU architectures change.
So this demands a very specific, very high-level kind of engineering talent.
The absolute top tier. A team that not only understands LLM architecture, but also the deep, deep internals of NVIDIA silicon. It tells you everything you need to know about the fierce intellectual intensity and just the caliber of their team. They chose the most difficult path because it was the only way they could compete on pure performance.
And the innovation isn't just at that low hardware level. It's also these high-level algorithmic breakthroughs that are aimed at fundamentally cutting computational cost.
Right.
Let's talk about DeepSeek Sparse Attention, or DSA. They introduced this in the v3.2 XP model. And this directly addresses that notorious quadratic scaling problem in attention.
DSA is one of their most important contributions algorithmically. For context, in a traditional transformer, that self-attention mechanism is a massive computational bottleneck.
Because its cost just explodes as the input gets longer.
It scales quadratically. If you double the length of the text you're processing, the compute time for attention quadruples. That's because every single token has to attend to every other token in the sequence.
Which is what makes long context inference so incredibly expensive.
Exactly. And DSA is designed to solve that by introducing sparsity. It intelligently restricts the scope of attention. Instead of every token looking at every other token, DSA has a novel mechanism where tokens only attend to a relevant subset of information.
It's like it knows what's important to look at.
Precisely. Maybe it's tokens that are syntactically important or semantically related. It trims both the memory and the compute requirements in a huge way without really sacrificing the quality of that long context understanding.
And the gains are big enough to be an economic game changer. I saw this technique is quantified to slash inference costs by over 50%.
Over 50%, while maintaining output quality. That suddenly makes running these huge text sequences for, say, legal document summarization or complex scientific analysis, suddenly it's economically viable.
And that's just one piece of the puzzle. They're also really aggressive adopters of the mixture of experts architecture, or MOE.
Yes, and MOE has become very popular across the industry, but Deepseek's implementation is exceptionally well optimized.
And MOE, just for a quick refresher, it doesn't mean the model is actually 100 times bigger.
Right, it just acts like it is. The full model might be enormous, but for any single query, only the most relevant portions, the experts get activated.
So you get the performance of a giant model with the computational cost of a much smaller one during inference.
Exactly. And Deepseek's effective implementation of that, combined with other techniques like multi-head latent detection, which is a way to refine how the model allocates resources during training. It just shows they're attacking inefficiency from every single angle. Low-level assembly, algorithmic sparsity, and architectural design.
And then finally, to really maximize speed on those constrained H800s, they're focusing intensely on data precision formats, specifically FP8.
FP8, or floating point 8. This is a really sophisticated engineering choice about resource management. In AI, numbers, the parameters, the activations, are usually stored in higher precision, like FP32 or BF16.
So more bits, more detail?
More detail, but it takes up more memory. FP8 is tiny. It's just 8 bits. For a model with billions of parameters, switching from, say, FP16 down to FP8 dramatically cuts your memory usage.
And speeds up calculations.
Because you're moving less data around the chip.
But there's always a trade-off, right? Less precision can mean less accuracy, less reliable output.
That's the balance they have to strike. FP8 is extremely useful for inference, where speed is everything, and a tiny loss in numerical fidelity is often acceptable.
So they're being strategic.
Very strategic. They're using it to balance speed with accuracy on their limited hardware. But critically, they are also working toward full BF16 support.
BF16, that's brain floating point 16.
And that format is widely seen as more stable and accurate for the actual training phase. It has a wider dynamic range, which helps prevent problems during those long, month-long training runs. So their dual format strategy really shows a nuanced understanding. Get maximum speed during inference with FP8, but ensure maximum stability during training with BF16 readiness.
So all the efficiency efforts we just discussed were basically mandatory, right? Given the H800 constraint. But the real strategic masterstroke here is the long-term move, the hybrid pivot toward domestic hardware.
This is the big one.
The strategy is now definitive. Deepseek trains on its existing NVIDIA H800 Horde, but they are aggressively moving inference workloads to Huawei's Ascend chips, specifically the Ascend 910C.
This is a monumental decision. It's a clear pivot in their strategic priorities. They're recognizing that their long-term resilience and their cost competitiveness depend on minimizing these external hardware dependencies.
Especially dependencies on American tech.
Exactly. The application layer, that's where the user interacts with the model, where the cost per query really adds up. That part is being ported away from the CUDA ecosystem and onto a growing domestic platform. And that immediately creates a huge commercial advantage in a constrained market.
And the speed of this adaptation is what has it's stunned the industry. Deepseek's team had just half a year, 6 months to adapt their complex, highly optimized models to work with Huawei's KNN software stack and Ascend hardware.
It's not just a fast pivot. That's an engineering sprint under immense pressure. It's an incredible feat of resource allocation and just pure engineering focus.
Can you give us some context on why that's so hard?
Well, most labs in the West get the massive benefit of the decades-mature CUD stack. Porting and optimizing these huge distributed models to an entirely new and still rapidly evolving software stack like
KNN is Huawei's equivalent to CDA.
Right. It's their direct proprietary equivalent. It's an immense technical undertaking. It requires rewriting or creating custom kernel operations, adapting massive data pipelines. I mean, I saw a developer on the VLLM Ascend community forum noting that even simple porting tasks can often take months.
Let alone the kind of deep optimization Deepseek achieved.
Exactly. And Deepseek v3.2 Exp was released in September 2025, and it launched with first-day optimizations for the Ascend hardware and the KNN stack.
So it wasn't an afterthought.
It was not an afterthought announced 2 quarters later. It was baked into the core release. That signals that the domestic platform is now a primary first-class target for them. They moved with the agility of a startup, even though they're running a frontier-level model.
And this required coordinated action far beyond just Deepseek and Huawei. It sounds like they had to build the entire domestic ecosystem around their model almost overnight.
Absolutely. The success of this pivot wasn't unilateral. It was a coordinated effort by the broader hardware ecosystem. Huawei's Ascend team and the wider community around VLLM Ascend, they moved immediately.
What did they do?
They published custom operator installation steps, kernel packaging for the Ascend NPUs, the 910B and 910C, and a detailed inference recipe for immediate deployment. This coordinated, rapid response signals a fundamental strategic direction to build a resilient, vertically integrated stack.
And it wasn't just Huawei. Other Chinese chipmakers announced immediate compatibility, too.
This is the crucial signal of ecosystem maturity. You saw CamberCon update its VLLM MLU fork to support Deepseek v3.2 XP.
CamberCon is another significant domestic player.
A very significant one. And they specifically claimed that the combination of their inference engine and Deepseek Sparse Attention mechanism would drastically cut costs for processing long sequences on their hardware.
So everyone's getting on board.
At the same time, Hygon, with its DTK software stack, announced its DCU accelerators were tuned for zero-weight deployment. This cross-vendor simultaneous compatibility announcement is the clearest evidence you can get that Chinese firms are positioning their domestic platforms as first-class targets, collaborating closely with LLM developers like Deepseek rather than just playing catch-up.
Deepseek is also emphasizing portability, right? They're publicly referencing both Tieling and CUDA kernels in their technical docs.
That reference to Tieling is highly technical, but it's extremely meaningful for their strategic autonomy. Tieling is essentially a domain-specific language designed to write highly optimized kernel code specifically for Ascend hardware.
So by referencing both.
By referencing both Tieling and CUDA, Deepseek is signaling that they are managing their source code base so that the same model can be deployed across both NVIDIA and Chinese accelerators with only minimal changes. They are aiming for true CUDA parity at the deployment and inference phase,
which gives them huge flexibility
and significantly reduces their reliance on any single external supplier.
So let's talk about the actual performance. How do the Ascend chips stack up? Deepseek reported that the Huawei Ascend 910C delivers 60% of the inference performance of an NVIDIA H100.
And that 60% figure is remarkable. You have to remember, the H100 is the absolute pinnacle of global AI accelerator technology. It's backed by billions in R&D and decades of software refinement.
So getting to 60% of that is a huge achievement.
It confirms that Huawei's AI processor capabilities are advancing rapidly even under the most severe chip export constraints. And what's more, because Deepseek is now a native supporter of the 910C, experts believe more performance gains are coming.
Through more optimization.
Through continued manual optimization of the CUNN kernels, that's CNN's equivalent to the low-level CUDA libraries. They are just at the beginning of the optimization curve on Ascend.
But we should be clear, the journey to complete domestic self-reliance isn't finished, especially on the training side, which is much more demanding than inference.
That's a crucial nuance. While inference is progressing rapidly and showing fantastic results, the challenges remain in distributed training. Deepseek successfully trained their current models on their H800 cluster, but we did see reports that attempts to train a new, potentially even larger model entirely on Huawei chips ran into some issues.
It caused some delays. What does that signify about the maturity of the Ascend platform?
It just points to the sheer complexity of building these fault-tolerant distributed systems. Training a massive LLM takes months, sometimes running continuously for 120 days or more across thousands of interconnected chips.
And if anything goes wrong?
If the system isn't perfectly robust, any small hardware instability, a network interruption, a software bug, it can wipe out months of progress. The CUDA stack has had 2 decades to refine its stability for these massive runs. The KN stack is closing the gap at an incredible pace, but it takes time to debug and ensure that absolute rock-solid stability.
But it's not impossible.
Not at all. We should also note the success of other huge domestic models, like the Pangu Ultra 718B MoE, which were successfully trained on Huawei chips. It proves the ecosystem is moving very quickly toward that comprehensive stability.
Okay, so the technical desperation, the optimization, the hybrid pivot, it all culminates in one thing: a massive economic shockwave. The cost structure that Deepseek has created is arguably its most disruptive contribution to the global AI market.
Absolutely. We are talking about reducing advanced LLM inference costs down to 1 yuan per million tokens.
1 yuan, that's what, about 14 US cents?
About that, yes. It's revolutionary. And on top of that, Deepseek proactively halved prices on its standard software tools. This extreme low-cost offering just fundamentally changes the economics of deploying advanced AI at scale.
And that ultra-low cost has an immediate, profound effect: the true democratization of intelligence. It collapses the financial barrier to entry. It accelerates digital transformation, especially in emerging markets where capital is much more constrained than in Silicon Valley.
Let's make that real. Look at the impact through the lens of a specific case study, like that anecdote we saw coming out of Jakarta, Indonesia.
Right, about Budi.
Budi, the CTO of a mid-sized logistics company operating across Southeast Asia. He desperately needed to integrate LLMs to optimize routing, to analyze customer feedback, to automate customer service.
All crucial tasks in a super competitive environment.
Exactly. But his problem wasn't a lack of need. It was the continuous cost. When he ran the numbers on using major U.S. cloud providers, which are all tied to NVIDIA-based infrastructure, the cost was just unsustainable.
It would have wiped out their margins.
Completely. AI remained this distant, unaffordable luxury for enterprise use.
But then he recalculated based on the DeepSeek Ascend pricing, that 1 yuan per million tokens.
And the entire business case just flipped on its head. It became an undeniable utility. Suddenly, deploying a sophisticated AI agent that spoke fluent local Bahasa Indonesia, running complex optimization algorithms in real time, it became financially viable.
He could use hundreds of thousands of tokens a day without that crippling meter running up.
For companies like Booties, this combination acts as a massive equalizer. It moves AI from being an expensive, experimental tech into a basic, accessible business utility. It powers a national shift toward digital efficiency.
This cost-efficiency model also directly challenges the capex-heavy scaling laws that have really dominated Western AI thinking for the last few years.
It really does.
DeepSeek's success, achieved with an estimated pre-training cost of only $5.6 million, it directly questions that dogma that you have to spend billions to compete at the frontier.
And this is sparking a really profound debate in the industry. Traditional scaling laws, which are championed by Western researchers, they suggest that performance improves predictably with more compute and bigger models.
Which inherently favors the companies with bottomless pockets.
Right, the ones who can just buy more H100s. Deepseek's approach argues that software refinement, clever algorithmic design, the PTX code, the DSA can substitute for, or at least significantly reduce the need for, that brute force computation. They're proving that the efficiency frontier has not yet been fully explored.
So as a result, are we seeing a shift in where investment capital is flowing, away from pure infrastructure and more toward the application layer?
That's the consequence. Because the cost of the underlying compute is so much lower, the return on investment for building specialized AI applications becomes far more attractive. It's driving this massive explosion of new use cases in enterprise AI, fueling the development of task-specific agents and increasing consumer utility. We're moving from the infrastructure building phase to the intense application optimization phase.
And this massive reduction in cost brings us to a crucial macroeconomic concept: Jevons Paradox.
Jevons Paradox is a fascinating economic principle. It states that technological advancements that increase the efficiency with which a resource is used,
In this case, AI compute,
can paradoxically lead to an increase in the overall consumption of that resource.
because it becomes so much cheaper and more accessible.
Precisely. DeepSeek collapses the financial barrier for millions of potential users and thousands of mid-market enterprises. The total addressable market for AI services just expands dramatically when the pro-token cost drops by 90% or more.
So wait, you're saying making something cheaper actually makes people use more of it, so the total demand goes up?
That's it in a nutshell. So while individual companies like Deepseek are being incredibly efficient with their hardware, the overall market's hunger for AI services ensures that the infrastructure demand continues to climb.
And this helps explain why, despite all these claims of efficiency, we aren't seeing a sudden retreat from infrastructure build-out. Major U.S. hyperscalers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, are all expected to maintain substantial capex plans through 2025.
They're responding to the demand driven by Jevons Paradox. The efficiency introduced by DeepSeek doesn't shrink the market, it expands it. The long-term trajectory for overall AI hardware demand remains strong. DeepSeek introduced efficiency, but the global market's hunger for AI ensures the need for continued massive infrastructure build-out. Competition remains fierce on all fronts: efficiency, cost, and raw scale.
If we zoom out a bit, DeepSeek's entire strategy, the combination of that ruthless H800 optimization and the rapid Ascend integration, it's far more than just a business plan.
It's a blueprint.
It really is. It's a blueprint for technological self-reliance. It proves that vertical integration, owning the optimization from the software layer all the way down to the specific domestic hardware, is not only possible but commercially devastatingly efficient.
And this blueprint is immediately inspiring nations all over the world, particularly those who are concerned with data sovereignty and supply chain vulnerability. The most compelling case study right now is in Malaysia.
Right. They launched their strategic artificial intelligence infrastructure back in May of 2025.
And that deployment was specifically powered by Huawei Ascend GPUs. It marks the first national-scale sovereign LLM deployment for DeepSeek outside of China.
That is a definitive move toward creating a truly sovereign AI stack. The initial infrastructure, it features a generative AI cloud environment run by a Malaysian firm using those Huawei Ascend GPUs in the Ultramatic DT250 AI server.
The intention is explicit and multifaceted: data security and resilience. By localizing the LLMs, using a model like Deepseek that's proven to run efficiently on non-Western hardware, and ensuring that data is processed locally on servers managed by Malaysians, they achieve a high degree of user privacy and data security.
The whole stack, the servers, the LLM, the data, it all stays within Malaysia's borders.
And the scale of this investment indicates a real national commitment. The Malaysian firm, Skyvast Cloud, plans to deploy 3,000 advanced GPUs across infrastructure zones by 2026.
Offering GPU as a service to the government, to businesses, universities.
It's establishing a national technological spine. And they cemented the strategy with the launch of the Malaysia-China Trusted Data Zone. This bilateral corridor links Cyberjaya with the Shanghai Pilot-Free Trade Zone, creating a framework for seamless, secure, cross-border AI development.
So this whole model offers a path for other nations to rapidly deploy sophisticated AI while keeping full national control.
And it's being watched very closely across the region, especially in developed tech hubs like Singapore and aspiring hubs like Thailand.
Absolutely. You can just imagine the impact on a systems architect in Singapore, let's call her Wei, who's tasked with building a national resilient AI solution. For years, the conversation for her has been dominated by the painful logistics of just securing scarce H100s.
But when she dissected the Deepseek model, she wasn't just impressed by the chat capabilities. She was utterly focused on that 6-month integration sprint to the Canon software stack.
Because that sprint proves that optimization for non-NVIDIA hardware is possible on an accelerated time frame.
It was a revelation for Wei and her team. It proved that achieving high performance on the Ascend platform wasn't some multi-year slog, but an engineering challenge that could be conquered quickly through focused, intense optimization.
It fundamentally shifted their internal conversation.
It shifted it from how do we secure more foreign chips to how do we replicate DeepSeek's efficiency with the regional hardware available to us. It validates that a resilient, self-reliant AI ecosystem can be built without submitting to the prevailing Silicon Valley hardware monopoly.
And finally, this story provides a kind of rallying cry for excellence that resonates at the grassroots level for emerging tech talent. It shifts the focus from the size of your budget to the quality of your engineering.
This is perhaps the most inspiring outcome. I think of someone like Tuan, a junior developer in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, or a young engineer in Yangon, Myanmar, poring over the technical papers detailing the Deepseek team's sparse attention mechanisms.
To them, it's not just a business success story.
It's tangible proof. It demonstrates that innovation is fundamentally about algorithmic elegance, the intellectual will, and the determination to push code to its absolute limit, rather than simply depending on massive venture capital funding.
That ferocious intellectual intensity, driven by necessity, has created more elegant, more refined solutions than development guided by limitless resources. Deepseek has shown that constraints don't limit innovation. They often ruthlessly force it.
The profound takeaway here is that the competitive advantage doesn't always go to the team with the largest cluster. Sometimes it goes to the team with the most ingenious software.
When we synthesize this entire Deepseek journey, from the grueling custom PTX code on H800s to that revolutionary yuan inference cost on Ascend chips, the resulting lesson is globally profound.
It really is.
Deepseek's success, achieved with that estimated pre-training cost of only $5.6 million, it provides an irrefutable retort to the idea that competing with frontier models today is hopeless unless you have a $100 million capex budget.
And that's because Deepseek's models are essentially distilled intelligence. They're streamlined, hyper-efficient versions of the foundational knowledge that's been built globally. By leveraging and building upon existing open-source adjacent knowledge and just focusing their immense engineering talent on efficiency, they achieve impressive performance at a fraction of the cost.
It proves that efficiency is now the primary competitive differentiator in the AI race.
And this effort powerfully reinforces the concept that innovation is profoundly cumulative. Every major scientific or technological breakthrough is built on thousands of prior achievements.
It's like the discovery of the gene editing technology, CRISPR. That revolutionary technology didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was built on decades of groundwork. The discovery of CRISPR sequences in the 80s, which itself followed the work on DNA structure decades earlier.
It's the same process, and it means that the intellectual and algorithmic efficiency breakthroughs made by Deepseek, regardless of their geopolitical origin, become the foundation for the next wave of global innovation. Every discovery, no matter where it happens, ultimately benefits humanity by refining the tools available to all of us.
The future of artificial intelligence is rapidly being defined not just by who can amass the biggest, most expensive cluster of H100s, but by who is most ruthlessly efficient. It's shifting the industry's focus away from hardware dominance and toward open-source accessibility and maximum application utility for the global market.
The DeepSeek hybrid model is the clearest demonstration yet that the most powerful form of innovation often emerges when engineers are forced to operate not with infinite money, but with infinite creativity.